Normally, if you're looking for hands from out of position to check raise the river as a bluff with, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the time, you want to do that with a hand that has some showdown value. And the reason why is because
in this particular hand, there's a straddle to 8. There's a limp under the gun +1. Villain in the hand is on the button, and we're 824 effective to start.
Okay.
He makes it 34. The small blind folds, and then we're in the big blind with king 9 of diamonds. I guess this is the first decision point. I ended up 3-betting to 120. I don't think I really want to have any flats here, especially with the limp under the gun.
So I was going to say, how's the pot getting this big? So there's one limp and this guy just made it 34 over the top of a limp. No straddle or anything? Or
there's a straddle. So there's a straddle
Okay.
to 8 and then a limp under the gun.
Okay, That makes more sense. All right. I thought I missed something. So one limp under the gun. What is it, 8-handed or 6-handed or something?
Yeah, I think it's 8-handed at the time.
Okay, so UTG limps. And this guy makes it 34, and you're in the big blind with king 9 of diamonds. So it sounds to me like you're deciding to 3-bet. I mean, obviously, it's very, very cuspy, Peter, right? Very, very cuspy. You want to drive the limper out. I have seen some pre-flop charts, though, against late position open in configurations. I mean, I've even seen, I've been looking at this like pre-solved thing, Solver Plus. I mean, not all the pre-flop charts are all the same, but that has partials of like king 9 suited, like 3-betting in the small blind against like a button open. Just something in the theory that slightly differs in live play for you guys that are watching. The theory would say that when the button opens, when the button raises over the top of a limper, that's supposed to be a tighter range, right, than straight opening. And I would say for the most part, that's true. I mean, obviously, the button is going to have more straight opens than opens over the top of a limp, but it might not be as tight as you think, as we saw from the first caller today when the guy had like the jack 8 of hearts, right? It's not like, oh, the button's going to open 40% of his hands when it gets folded to him, but if there's a limper, he's only going to open 10% of his hands. It's probably not that drastic. It could be somewhere in the middle. I'm assuming you 3-bet because this probably wouldn't be a call if you didn't, right?
Yeah, I 3-bet. I think it could probably just be a fold. Like I said, I don't really love having flats, especially with the limper. I think just going with king 10 suited plus is fine. Maybe just hold the king 9. But yeah, I went 3-bet to 120 and just the villain called.
So you meant to 120. 3-bet to 120. Obviously, the limper folds, right?
Yeah, the limper folds.
And button calls.
Yeah.
So
for like
pot's like 250.
Sorry, go ahead.
Pot's like 250, something like that.
Yeah, 258, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, and for some real quick history on the villain, he's like definitely a wreck, but a little bit on the aggressive side. I've seen him like make some bluffs, like definitely not a professional player in any sense, but like one hand he had like 3-bet me turn, like he 3-bet the turn on a 4 straight as a bluff and then bluffed river. So like definitely a guy that can like make some moves, but mostly kind of plays as a normal kind of wreck player.
Okay.
So the flop comes king of spades, king of clubs, queen of spades.
So you flop trips.
Which is,
wow, interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's like a pretty good flop for our range overall, but I wasn't sure if it was one that we like just wanted to like be just betting everything with, just because it can still hit him pretty well. And I thought, given that he was someone who could bluff, I liked having some kings in my checking range. And since I definitely don't have worse than king 9, I decided to check.
And of course, what you're saying here is that, in very extreme configurations, we talk about like in 4-bet pots, you can almost like bet 25% on almost every single board heads up, with a few exceptions. In 3-bet pots, you still have a very high volume, but I think what Peter's saying is that even though this is a good board for Peter, it might not always be a bet, as opposed to like if the board came out, like 3-3-7, which would be probably always a bet, right? With the entire range.
I think I would just bet that with everything because he just has so much high card stuff.
Right. So what you're doing here is you're actually taking a king. Of course, there's less of a chance your opponent has a king, right? Because you have a king, and you're taking the worst king and basically checking it. Like, you're not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily say it's cutesy, but it's probably a little bit non-standard. But when you do see like if you go down the line of like King X here, which are the ones that you always bet and which are the ones that you sort of like check? Usually it's like hand quality with the kicker, like you bet Ace King, right? Like
Yeah.
down the
And
line.
yeah, and I think they're like we definitely could on some runouts, but I don't think there's like I don't think we get a like triple off for value on every run out here
Mm-hmm.
with like a weak king. So I think like
Mm-hmm.
checking some is nice. If it was a guy that like never bluffed, I may like always bet just because like why give him the extra equity and get a little bit of value. But
Yeah.
I wanted to check in this spot, yeah. So I checked and he checked back.
And again, this is a situation where the hand almost sort of plays itself in the sense that what I mean by that is that like whenever you block a lot of value here in the form of having a king and you check, it would be very surprised. Like how often do you think holding king nine when you check the flop that your opponent's going to bet when check to on king king queen?
I would think, I mean, not too often. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's obviously hard for them to have a king.
Mm-hmm.
It probably depends a bit on the player, maybe like, and like what size they're going to bet. Like I would be a little bit confused if I just like, if you bet like pot. But if you bet like, I could see people doing like a lot of betting, like a small size with like a bunch of pocket pairs or something, or like just trying to get me to fold. But it would depend on the sizing. But yeah, I'd be surprised to see like a big bet a ton of the time here.
By the way, some people in the chat are saying, well, how can you not bet here if you bet like ace jack and ace 10? I think if you look at this from a perspective that we're checking with some hands, maybe ace jack and ace 10 isn't always a bet, right? I mean, those are the nut no pairs. You have a gut shot, right? If you had ace jack or
Yeah,
ace 10, if you were going to check some of the time. So
yeah,
it goes check, check. Okay, so here it checks check, right?
yeah.
Okay.
And then the turn is the ace of spades, so bringing three spades.
So the front door spade, king, king, queen with two spades out there. Check, check. Turns the king of spades. You have king nine of, excuse me, the turns the ace of spades. You have king nine of diamonds. Obviously, jack 10 gets there now too. So there's three spades out there. Okay.
Yeah, so I decided I wanted to start betting at this point. I think there's plenty of hands to get value from, and also like some hands we want to like a little bit of protection. Like a hand like deuces with a spade still has like some equity that might
Mm-hmm.
fold to a bet or something.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't exactly sure how big I wanted to go. I didn't think like it was a spot that made sense to go huge because I don't know. So I bet 103, like because I think I want to get value from some ace x hands and queen x hands, maybe like queen jack or something.
Yeah, this is an interesting one here too. Like from a theory perspective, like how often you're supposed to be betting this card here on the turn too. Obviously I don't know it necessarily off the top of my head. What you're saying makes a whole lot of sense though. That you just you might get pieced off by a pair that has a spade in it some of the times, and then of course you're always getting called here. By an ace. I'm trying to put myself in your opponent's perspective. Like, am I checking back like Jack 10 suited here on the flop? Am I checking back spade draws? I think some of the time, just because I don't bet when check two on the flop, defending to your small blind three bet does not mean that I don't necessarily have a flush draw or a jack 10 because I don't really expect you to check fold. Like it's like you three bet the flop. How often are you check folding? You might have, I guess, maybe some like ace X suited that has no backdoor. Maybe that you check fold. I mean, I don't think you always call with like ace six of diamonds, right? On the flop, if
Yeah, I think I'd probably just fold
yeah.
that.
So it's interesting. So you bet 103. Okay.
Yeah, I bet 103 and villain calls.
So now it looks like the pot's 265-ish, something like that.
Or on the river, it's like 460 after the bet and call.
Oh, excuse me,
Because
four.
it's
Yeah,
260.
sorry, 465. Yeah, 465, 460, 465. Okay, so let's go to the river, and you guys have looks like
Around 600 back.
600 back. Okay, so 465. All right, let's go to the river.
So the river is the six of spades.
So king, king, queen, two spades. Turn here is the ace of spades. You bet 103 call. And now the river here is the six of spades. Okay. So four
Yeah.
spades. Okay.
Yeah, so obviously not the best card. I don't think, I think we obviously have to start with a check because I mean he could still have like we have too much showdown value to bluff. I think because he could He could have a hand worse than a king and just check it back. And we have other hands that I think we could bluff.
By the way, I
But
think that
obviously you
this
can't bet for value.
right, yeah, yeah. I mean that I think that that's right on par here. And then I did, I would say maybe about a month ago, a kind of a collection of things talking about check raising the river and like check raising the river for value, check raising the river as a bluff, and I'll repeat it here again because I think this is a really good example. Normally, if you're looking for hands from out of position to check raise the river as a bluff with, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the time, although we'll talk about it, what type of hand do you want to do that with? You want to do that with a hand that has some showdown value. And the reason why is because when you think of your option on the river, right, you check, well, if sometimes your opponent's going to check it back and you win if you have some showdown value, right? Whereas if you had like 5 high and you had no showdown value, you're never going to win if you check unless he bets and you raise. So that's not usually like a good plan. So the hands that you sometimes want to check raise bluff with at the end are hands that you think you can win if the action goes check, check. But when your opponent bets, you think the hand would be taken for a higher EV as a raise, right? As opposed to say a call or a fold. I mean, those are really that's kind of what you're looking for. And I think obviously this is a good setup for that, whether or not you execute on the raise at the end, meaning that there's really why would you ever bet the river here, right? There'd be no point from up front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think it makes much sense to bet. So yeah, I do check, and then villain bets 200. And I guess but one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically is I feel like this it's the player type of a rec player, but someone who can be a little bit bluffy and can be bluffy in some kind of creative ways, or at least some weird ways. But also someone who's kind of a standard rec player, and I don't expect to be betting super thin for value, what you think their bet range on this river for the sizing would be, because there's not a ton of value hands they can kind of super clearly have.
Well, just to again confirm for the people listening to this on the podcast, because this is always one that you kind of want to visualize with a 4 flush board. It's the king of spades, the king of clubs, the queen of spades, the ace of spades, and the 6 of spades. So the jack of spades, right, would be the nut flush, the nut 1 card flush, and then the 10 of spades, of course, would be the second one. And I think what Peter's talking about here, though, is that what does this bet represent here besides maybe what sizing here takes 200? Is the 10 of spades here really taking 200? I don't, boy, I'm trying to think if I put myself in your opponent's shoes and I had, say, black 10s and I played it this way, especially if I was up against somebody who's capable. But of course, I would consider myself a thinking player. I don't think I would bet with black 10s here at the end when check to, because sometimes you can get blown off of your equity, and it's just one of these spots where it's what are you really calling with here? The occasional unfull trip king, you know what I mean? There are some full houses that you might be playing sort of a little bit cagey, so it really should just be the jack of spades. So maybe your question is well, if it's the jack and the 10, maybe the raise can be profitable, but if it's just the jack, and the thing that I've learned here, if the guy's recreational, I don't like to try to get him off the jack of spades here, even if you have all the ace kings and pocket aces and pocket queens or something like that. I might just live to see another day and just fold. Were you thinking he might have the 10 of spades here?
I thought, yeah, I was thinking that was possible, and I thought that I definitely know 100% what he would do with the jack of spades, but I think there's a chance this guy might fold it. Because I think he's a guy that's thinking enough that he would at least know for sure that I'm repping a full house, but maybe he would still just call.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say. I mean, I was just definitely a little bit suspicious of the bet because I didn't think there were a ton of value hands. But on the other hand, I guess it's kind of hard to have a bluff.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say, can this ever be played as a call? So what is his range of calling the turn after it goes check, check? Because some people are well, what hands does he have the 10 of spades or the jack of spades in? Well, he could have pocket jacks with the jack of spades that would be played this way, ace jack with the jack of spades that could be played with this way, and obviously black tens. Like I'm not folding black tens to your $103 bet on the turn with a royal flush draw, right? If I'm in your opponent's position.
Yeah, I guess like kind of my thought on the river was like I didn't maybe like call it a little more reasonable. I don't think I considered it enough, just because I kind of thought that like obviously it costs a lot more to bluff raise, but I thought we could just kind of get like a lot of hands to fold, whether he was bluffing or had like thin value by jamming.
So this guy
And
I think this guy makes a good point here too. Scott Alford in the live chat, he said, "We're never gonna check a boat here though, because flushes are gonna check back a bunch. So we always want to bet our boats and our bluffs." It's interesting about our boats. Like that's kind of how, especially the sort of the weaker the player, the more I do want to just bet. I mean, I don't know how would I be checking a boat here that much? I would be very afraid that it would get checked through.
There's another thing I thought of. I think that like I think I would maybe check. I don't. I think I would mostly just bet too. I think if I would maybe check aces just because you're not blocking a king, and maybe maybe he has like king queen somehow, and if you bet river with aces, he doesn't raise, but like he'll always call a check jam or something.
And the only way that you could really call, as opposed to I guess fold, would be somehow if he was turning an ace into a bluff. But why would he necessarily do that, right? Because you could just be giving up, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So what'd you end up doing?
So I ended up jamming. I mean, like
Peter.
I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was. I definitely wanted like a king to bluff, and I was like, well, this is my worst king, so I'll just use I'll use the two king nine suited combos, but I ended up getting snapped by the king queen suited.
Oh no!
So it's not. Yeah.
I think the crux of this hand comes back to like I don't know how often the ten of spades is betting, and if really like you're just trying to get the guy off of the jack of spades, and he does also have some boats here that are occasionally slow played through, right? Just due to sheer combinations, then it can't be a check raise bluff if he just has the jack of spades and some boats, because I don't even think at what rate is the jack of spades folding. And then you sort of go down that road of like, how often are you actually checking a boat? I mean, here's the thing, like I would have anytime I'm up against somebody capable, like if I was playing against you and like one of these situations came up where I bet the jack of spades at the end, I'd have a very, very difficult time folding because I knew you'd be capable and you might be pulling some bullshit or something like that, right?
Yeah, like I think in the moment I didn't really want to call, but I thought that for some reason I thought his betting range on the river just could be probably wider than it is, and I thought like if his range was wide, then like I could just get a lot of folds from a jam, and like it is a lot harder for him to have a house when I have a king.
But how wide though? Like how wide did you think his betting range was at the end?
I thought it's not the best logic because I thought that like he could have maybe like some jack of spades, ten of spades, and then like some bluffs too. But like if I think he would mostly have to have a good amount of bluffs, and then at that point it just gets kind of close to calling because I don't think he'd ever bluff with anything that beats us. I mean, like maybe once, I guess we even chop with worse kings, so that's not even like we would maybe like if you turn king 10 into a bluff, I think almost everyone just checks that back.
I think you're going way too far down. You're going way too far down the line. I just like every time
I think it was a bad bluff.
Yeah, it's just a little bit fancy. And again, to expect someone to if they're only betting the jack of spades, and then basically to expect them to fold that. I think it's actually interesting from the villain's perspective. If you're a good player versus a good player, Peter, if you put yourself in your opponent's perspective, right? Is Jack with the jack of spades even a bet at the end? Like, are you betting against yourself with the jack of spades at the end? Should it be a bet?
I think it may. It would depend on like what size I win. I think I haven't thought about the spot really, and I have no idea what the theory is. But like, I wouldn't be surprised if you were supposed to like bet really small on the river as the button because it's just pretty hard to have bluffs, and like that makes it a little bit easier to bet wide with some hands like the jack of spades. So like maybe you could even bet like 100 to 150, and then I think that like if that's the size you're going to use, you can probably bet it. But I don't think I wouldn't like. It's kind of awkward, yeah, to bet like the jack of
I
spades
don't
for
know.
like
It would be.
250.
It wouldn't not be surprising if the theory says this is not a bet with the jack of spades. I don't know. It just opens yourself up to,
Yeah,
or
maybe
some
like
sort of
ace
weird
jack
thing
with
where
the
you're
jack of
supposed to
spades, but not
bet
jack
and
jack.
call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, good to talk to you, Peter. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call-in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.